the photo that turned everything into war. One photograph may have shattered one of hip-hop's most profitable alliances, and the real reason behind the fallout could be darker than anyone expected. When Big Meech appeared beside Rick Ross after returning home, the image looked like a simple celebration, but to 50 Cent, it may have represented something completely different. Betrayal. For years, 50 had invested his money, reputation, and television power into bringing the BMF story to millions of viewers. He helped transform Big Meech's legacy into a successful series and placed Lil Meech at the center of that universe. From the outside, it looked like a partnership built on respect, loyalty, and shared success. Then Big Meech stood beside the one man 50 had publicly battled for years. Rick Ross had already turned Meech's name into one of rap's most recognizable lyrics. To Ross, the reunion was historic. To Big Meech, it may have been business, appreciation, or simply a decision to remain neutral. But neutrality means nothing when two powerful rivals expect loyalty. Almost immediately, the tone changed. Social media posts appeared, old allegations resurfaced, questions about court paperwork, sealed records, and alleged cooperation with authorities began spreading across the internet. The celebration surrounding Big Meech's return was replaced by a public trial conducted through captions, interviews, memes, and unfinished documentaries. But there was one problem. The strongest accusations were still missing the one thing that could settle everything: verified evidence available for the public to examine. And that is where this story becomes dangerous. Because the same paperwork expected to destroy Big Meech's reputation may have created serious questions about the people accusing him. Where are you watching from today? Comment your city or country below. Press 1 if you believe this was about loyalty. Or press 2 if you believe it was always about business. Subscribe now, because the next part reveals why 50 Cent may have viewed that single photograph as a declaration of war. The empire 50 Cent helped build. To understand the intensity of 50 Cent's reaction, you have to understand how much he believed he had invested in the BMF name. This was not simply another television project. The series connected his growing entertainment empire with one of the most famous street legends in modern American culture. Big Meech and Southwest T had already built a mythology that stretched far beyond Detroit. Their story reached nightlife, fashion, music, celebrity culture, and the image of wealth that dominated hip-hop during the early 2000s. By the time 50 brought BMF to television, the name already carried enormous power. But turning a legend into a successful drama required access, promotion, casting, money, and risk. 50 did more than attach his name to the show. He placed Lil Meech in the lead role, helping create an acting career for someone who had never carried a major television production before. That decision gave the series something no ordinary casting process could provide: authenticity. Audiences were not just watching an actor portray Big Meech, they were watching Meech's own son step into his father's story. From 50's perspective, that opportunity may have created an obligation. He likely expected the Flannery family to understand that their interests were now connected to his. Their success strengthened his television empire, while his platform expanded their influence with a new generation. That is why the Rick Ross appearance mattered so much. Ross was not a neutral celebrity in 50's world. He was a longtime rival whose feud with 50 had survived diss records, interviews, lawsuits, trolling, and years of public humiliation. Big Meech may have viewed the moment as appreciation toward an artist who honored his name and reportedly supported his family. But 50 may have viewed it as public disrespect from someone whose story he had helped rebuild. The alliance had not officially ended, yet the message traveling across the internet was clear. Big Meech would not allow another man's rivalry to determine whom he could stand beside. When disappointment became an accusation, what happened next transformed a disagreement over loyalty into a battle over reputation. Instead of keeping the conflict behind closed doors, 50 Cent used the arena where he has defeated countless opponents: social media. 50 understands the internet better than almost anyone in hip-hop. He knows how to turn a photograph into a headline, a caption into a controversy, and a joke into a narrative. repeated by thousands of people. Once he begins targeting someone, silence can look like weakness. While any response gives him more material, Big Meech faced an opponent who had spent years mastering that environment. Meech's legend was built in a completely different world, one shaped by personal relationships, street reputation, and face-to-face loyalty. Online warfare operates under different rules. Soon, allegations suggesting that Big Meech may have cooperated with authorities began circulating again. The language was explosive because few accusations carry more weight within street culture, even without publicly verified documents. The suggestion alone was enough to divide viewers. Some believe 50 must possess information that had not yet been released. Others questioned the timing. Why did the allegations become central only after Big Meech appeared with Rick Ross? If the claims were credible, had 50 known about them while producing multiple seasons of BMF? And if he had known, why continue promoting Meech's legacy? Those questions created the first major crack in the campaign. The controversy was no longer only about whether Big Meech had done something wrong. It was also about when 50 obtained his information and why he decided to use it publicly. The possibility of a hidden documentary made the situation even more intense. Followers were told that someone close to the case possessed paperwork capable of revealing Meech's full role. Posts suggested that the truth was coming and that the public would soon see evidence strong enough to end the debate. But weeks became months, and the promised explosion never arrived. Instead of answers, the silence created an even larger mystery: Tammy Cohen and the documentary that never came. At the center of the promised expose was Tammy Cohen, a woman described by various speakers as having access to affidavits connected to wiretaps and other sensitive records. Her name quickly became one of the most important pieces of 50 Cent's campaign against Big Meech. The public was told that these documents could explain Meech's alleged role and challenge the image that had been promoted through the BMF television franchise. A documentary was discussed as though its release were inevitable. That promise changed the conversation. Fans were no longer debating ordinary gossip. They believed a professionally produced investigation might reveal sealed testimony, hidden agreements, and information that had remained buried for years. 50 amplified the tension with provocative imagery and captions aimed directly at Meech's reputation. The strategy was familiar: announce that damaging information exists, allow the internet to imagine the worst, and keep the accused person reacting while the supposed evidence remains just beyond reach. But the documentary did not arrive. As time passed, Tammy remained largely absent from the public discussion. There were no major trailers, release dates, or clear production updates capable of proving that the project was moving forward. The longer the silence lasted, the more viewers began asking whether the documentary had collapsed behind the scenes, or whether it had ever contained the evidence people were expecting. The missing project became a problem for those making the accusations. A delayed documentary can create anticipation, but an invisible documentary eventually creates doubt. If the paperwork was decisive, why not release it? If the claims were strong, why allow the story to fade? And if the documents were legally restricted, how could the public evaluate the allegations being made from them? Then another voice entered the controversy: a man known as Cuffy. Unlike a social media caption, Cuffy claimed a personal connection to the events. He said his own federal sentence was tied to actions involving Tammy and Big Meech. His arrival appeared to give the accusations a witness, but once his own records were examined, the story began turning in a direction few people expected. Cuffy's third-party theory. Cuffy's claim introduced one of the most controversial phrases in the entire dispute: third-party cooperation. According to his version of events, Big Meech allegedly connected him with Tammy Cohen, who later provided information to federal authorities. Cuffy argued that Tammy's cooperation ultimately benefited Meech while contributing to his own legal problems. That theory allowed him to accuse Big Meech without claiming Meech personally sat down with investigators. In Cuffy's telling, Meech's involvement happened indirectly through another person. For supporters of the allegation, this sounded like an explanation for why direct paperwork bearing Meech's name had been difficult to locate. For critics, it sounded like a way to make a serious accusation without producing a document showing Meech personally providing information. The distinction mattered. Cooperation with federal authorities normally leaves a procedural trail, Motions, sentencing records, hearing transcripts, plea agreements, or docket entries can reveal when a defendant received consideration. Big Meech and those defending him argued that another person could not simply cooperate on his behalf while leaving no trace of how he received the benefit. Cuffy supporters insisted that the situation was more complicated and that sealed records could contain the missing connection. That claim kept the mystery alive because sealed paperwork cannot easily be challenged by the public. For months, the argument remained trapped in the same circle. Cuffy said the truth existed in records most people could not see. Big Meech denied wrongdoing and demanded evidence. 50 continued presenting Tammy and Cuffy as important voices. Viewers chose sides based largely on reputation. Then Big Meech made a move that changed the balance of power. Instead of continuing to trade insults, he challenged his critics to obtain the records and release them. His position was simple: stop discussing hidden proof and show the public exactly what the documents say. That challenge placed enormous pressure on Cuffy. If he refused, critics could accuse him of hiding behind sealed paperwork. If he agreed, the records might finally validate his story. But when documents connected to his own case became available, they did not produce the clean victory his supporters expected. Big Meech shifts the burden of proof. Big Meech's response was strategically different from everything that had come before it. He did not attempt to answer every insult. He did not match 50 Cent post for post. Instead, he focused on one demand: produce the paperwork. That move shifted the burden away from the accused and placed it directly on the people making the allegation. Meech argued that if Cuffy's records proved cooperation, then those documents should be unsealed, examined, and presented publicly. This was a powerful change in strategy, because internet controversies often survive through repetition rather than evidence. The more often an accusation appears in videos, comments, and reposts, the more people begin treating it as established fact. Meech challenged that process. He effectively told viewers not to trust him. 50 Cent, Cuffy, Tammy, or any narrator. Trust the documents. Whack. 100 reportedly became involved in obtaining records connected to Cuffy's case. Through communications involving Cuffy's family and legal representatives, documents were said to have been acquired and circulated for review. The moment should have been devastating for Big Meech. After months of speculation, the paperwork was finally entering the public conversation. If it contained a direct link showing that Meech had provided information or received a benefit from another person's cooperation, his reputation could have suffered permanent damage. But the available records reportedly focused heavily on Cuffy's own plea agreement, criminal conduct, associates, and admissions. Instead of providing an obvious document showing Big Meech personally informing on anyone, the paperwork raised questions about what Cuffy himself had told federal authorities. That did not automatically prove every allegation against Meech was false. It did, however, weaken the certainty with which those allegations had been repeated. Now the witness accusing Big Meech had to explain his own record. The story had reached its first major reversal. The man expected to authenticate the campaign against Meech was becoming the subject of the investigation, and the evidence was beginning to challenge the image he had presented publicly. The paperwork turns against the accuser. The records reportedly revealed that Cuffy's plea agreement included detailed admissions concerning his own criminal case, according to summaries presented by commentators reviewing the documents. Cuffy acknowledged involvement in serious offenses and identified other individuals connected to those events. These details mattered because his public argument against Big Meech was built around the idea that cooperation, direct or indirect, destroyed a person's credibility. Yet the language attributed to Cuffy's own agreement appeared to show that he had provided information as part of resolving his case. The issue was not whether Cuffy had the legal right to enter a plea agreement. Defendants make such decisions for many reasons, and legal cases can involve complicated negotiations. The issue was consistency. How could someone publicly accuse Big Meech of hidden cooperation while avoiding questions about statements contained in his own paperwork? The documents reportedly described Cuffy's role in a narcotics conspiracy involving several associates. They also contained admissions connected to acts of retaliation and identified individuals alleged to have participated in violent crimes. Because these claims involve serious criminal conduct, They must be understood through the language of the available records and not treated as independent proof beyond those legal documents. Still, the level of detail reportedly contained in the agreement created an uncomfortable contrast with Cuffy's public posture. The same paperwork expected to expose Big Meech appeared to contain clearer admissions from Cuffy than direct evidence against Meech. That reversal altered the emotional center of the story. Big Meech was no longer simply defending himself. Viewers were now questioning whether the campaign against him had relied too heavily on an accuser whose own history had not been fully disclosed. Even commentators who had previously repeated Cuffy's allegations began acknowledging that they should have waited for official records before reaching conclusions. But the documents created another problem, one that extended beyond Cuffy. 50 Cent had publicly aligned himself with both Cuffy and Tammy. If he continued supporting their project after reviewing the paperwork, critics could argue that his campaign was not really about principles. It might have been about winning, the timeline that weakened the entire claim. Beyond the admissions in Cuffy's plea agreement, another issue threatened the foundation of his story: the timeline. Cuffy's theory depended on the idea that Big Meech connected him to Tammy Cohen, and that this connection contributed to his federal case. But according to the way the records were interpreted by those reviewing them, investigators had already been examining Cuffy and his associates before Tammy allegedly entered the picture. If the investigation was already active, blaming Big Meech for creating the case becomes much more difficult. Federal investigations rarely begin with one dramatic conversation. They are often built over time through surveillance, informal, controlled transactions, phone records, witness interviews, and evidence gathered from multiple defendants. If agents had already connected Cuffy to a larger narcotics conspiracy, Tammy's alleged role may have been only one part of a much broader case. That possibility does not eliminate every question. Tammy could still have provided information relevant to investigators. Big Meech could still have introduced two people who later became connected to the case. But introduction is not the same as cooperation, and association is not proof of intent. The available paperwork reportedly did not show Big Meech personally giving information to agents, signing a cooperation agreement, or receiving a documented sentencing benefit tied to Cuffy. Without that direct link, the accusation relied heavily on interpretation. This is where the story became less about who had the loudest platform and more about evidentiary standard. To label someone publicly with one of the most damaging accusations in street culture requires more than suspicion, timing, or personal resentment. It requires proof. Cuffy's version of events may reflect what he genuinely believes happened, but belief and documentation are not the same thing. The records reportedly showed his own circle, his own conspiracy, and his own admissions far more clearly than they showed Big Meech's involvement. By this stage, the campaign that began with one photograph beside Rick Ross had expanded into a larger question: had the allegations been used selectively? And that question led directly back to 50 Cent. Was this about truth or control? The most uncomfortable question was no longer whether 50 Cent disliked Big Meech standing beside Rick Ross. That part was obvious. The deeper question was how long 50 had possessed or heard the allegations he later used against Meech. If 50 knew about the claims while developing BMF, promoting the series, supporting Lil Meech, and benefiting from the family's story, why did those claims become urgent only after the Rick Ross appearance? There are several possibilities. Perhaps 50 received new information after the relationship collapsed. Perhaps he had heard rumors earlier, but did not consider them credible until Cuffy and Tammy became involved. Perhaps the public feud encouraged him to investigate more deeply, but critics saw another possibility. The information may have been tolerated while the partnership remained profitable and weaponized only after Meech refused to choose 50's side. That interpretation placed 50's motives under scrutiny. He had built a reputation as one of hip-hop's most relentless strategists. He rarely enters a public conflict without understanding how attention can be converted into influence, entertainment, or money. A documentary exposing Big Meech would generate enormous interest. It could extend the BMF conversation beyond the television series, create new content, and allow 50 to control both the rise and destruction of the same public legend. Yet the documentary remained unreleased. The strongest evidence remained disputed, and the records that did surface appeared to create more problems for Cuffy than for Meech. None of this proves 50 knowingly promoted false information. It does, however, reveal the danger of allowing personal rivalry to become a substitute for verified reporting. Big Meech may have underestimated the politics of the modern internet. In the world he came from, a man could respect two rivals separately and stay outside their conflict. In the social media era, refusing to choose a side can be interpreted as choosing the enemy. One image beside Rick Ross was enough to turn gratitude into resentment, business into warfare, and old allegations into weapons. Now the public is left with two competing stories. One says Big Meech betrayed the man who rebuilt his legacy. The other says 50 Cent tried to control a legend who refused to become anyone's property. And until stronger evidence appears, the truth remains trapped somewhere between loyalty, money, ego, and the paperwork everyone claimed would settle the war. The real lesson behind the war. The final lesson in this conflict is bigger than 50 Cent, Big Meech, Rick Ross, Cuffy, or any unfinished documentary. It is about what happens when loyalty, business, reputation, and internet power collide in public. Strategically, 50 Cent understood something Big Meech may have underestimated. In the modern entertainment industry, the person who controls the narrative often controls the outcome. A single post can become a headline. A repeated accusation can begin to feel like established truth. And once millions of people choose a side, correcting the record becomes far more difficult than creating the original controversy. But narrative power has limits. If a campaign is built around promised evidence, that evidence eventually has to appear. Otherwise, every delay creates doubt. Every contradiction weakens credibility. And every newly released document can reverse the pressure. Big Meech's strongest move was not responding to every insult. It was demanding that the paperwork be shown. That decision turned an emotional argument into a question of proof. It also offered a lesson for anyone facing public accusations. Anger may create attention, but patience, documentation, and consistency are usually stronger defenses. At the same time, no one should treat incomplete records as permission to declare total victory. Court cases are complicated. Sealed materials may exist, and public summaries do not always reveal the full legal picture. The responsible conclusion is not that every person on one side is innocent and every person on the other side is dishonest. The responsible conclusion is that serious allegations require serious evidence. There is also a human lesson. Pride can destroy relationships that once created opportunities for everyone involved. Business partners do not have to become permanent enemies simply because they disagree. Respect can survive separation, and conflict does not have to become humiliation. In hip-hop, competition will always exist, but there is a difference between competition and destruction. A disagreement can be addressed without attacking families, rewriting history, or encouraging audiences to hate people they have never met. The wisest path forward would be transparency, accountability, and peace. Release verifiable information. Correct false claims. Admit mistakes where necessary. And allow every person involved to move forward without turning real lives into endless entertainment. Now it is your turn. Press 1 if you believe the controversy was mainly about loyalty. Or press 2 if you believe money and control drove the entire conflict. Share your opinion respectfully in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Like this video, share it with another hip-hop fan, and subscribe to the channel for more carefully researched stories about rap's biggest rivalries, hidden alliances, and unanswered questions.